Right, I had a different video I wanted to film this weekend. However, yesterday Dorna announced a huge piece of news regarding the future of Moto3. From the year 2028 onwards, Moto3 is going to be converting to a one-make series, meaning that all the engines are going to be made by one manufacturer. Currently they use both KTM and Honda. From 2028 onwards, this is going to switch to only Yamaha. And the other big part of this is that the size of the engines is going to increase massively. At the moment, Moto3 uses 250cc engines. Now they're going to move to 700cc engines. This is a huge increase, and as a result, the bikes are going to increase massively in size in Moto3. And I've seen mostly mixed receptions to these changes, so I'm going to give my thoughts here, and to me there's two parts of this. Personally, I think the fact that Moto3 is moving to a single make engine, with one manufacturer making all the engines, they should be exactly the same. I think that is a positive thing for Moto3. At the Moto3 level, I believe that the bike should be pretty much the same, if not the exact same. Now, with these changes, the bikes aren't going to be the exact same, because I believe they will still be able to have different chassis on all the different bikes. However, the engines will all be the exact same, and I think that is positive for Moto3. Moto3, in my opinion, should all be about the riders, and the best riders rising to the top. The riders shouldn't have to rely on being on one of the best bikes, or the best teams, to be able to challenge for world titles. Moto3 is pretty good at that anyway. You don't have to be on the best bike to compete. However, the people who are on the best bikes do usually have the best chance of winning. Whereas I think that if everybody has the exact same engines, the grid will A, become a lot closer, which will make for more competitive racing, in theory a more interesting championship battle. And secondly, it will just make everything a bit more fair, and the people who rise to the top will be the best riders. Moto2 is currently using the same model. Every single Moto2 bike uses the exact same engine, so I don't see why Moto3 should be any different. And honestly, I think it works really well for Moto2. We've seen the likes of Diogo Moreira this season, who is on, in theory, quite a crap bike. Like, he's not on one of the most prestigious teams in Moto2. However, he's fighting really hard for the title at the moment because he's one of the best riders on the grid. That's how Moto3 should be. You shouldn't be held back by the bike in Moto3, I think. And there are certain teams where you can tell they're a crap team and they are well behind the rest of the grid. I don't think Moto3 should be like that, and I'm glad that these changes are coming into place. However, I think the most controversial part of this is the fact that the engines are going to be increasing massively in size, and the fact that the bikes are also going to increase in size because of this. I am fairly indifferent to this. I think there's positives and negatives to this. The main negative, of course, is going to be the lack of pack racing. The main selling point of Moto3 is the complete chaos racing caused by the pack racing. You get massive groups of like 10-15 riders all battling for the lead. And I think with much bigger bikes, we are going to see much less of this. I do still think that we will get it to a certain extent. We've had a few pack races in Moto2 this year, especially Silverstone is the main one that comes to mind. I do still think we'll get that in Moto3, and remember, the bikes are still going to be smaller than in Moto2. So in theory, we should still get more pack racing in Moto3 than in Moto2. However, I think it will be a lot less than we currently see, and it will be a lot less chaotic. Which is bad for entertainment purposes, of course, because I love Moto3 and the absolute chaos that ensues at Moto3 races. However, from a safety point of view, this probably is the right thing to do. We saw the pack racing resulted in Luke Lunetta getting very badly injured at Assen this year. He literally got run over by a bike. He was very lucky not to get seriously injured. I mean, he did get seriously injured, but he was lucky to, still be on the grid after that. And I think that with an increase in bike size and less pack racing, in theory you should get less incidents like that, and I do think that overall for the safety of Moto3, having less pack racing is a positive step, especially with Moto3 having very chaotic young riders who just want to kick lumps out of each other. It is quite a dangerous class anyway, and that danger factor is increased by the fact that there's about 15 bikes scrapping for one position. If you have less of that, the safety will be increased, which I think is a positive thing. This does mean, however, that the entertainment factor of Moto3 might be reduced a bit. That being said though, Moto2 this season has been really great, and I think that if Moto3 was to become a bit more like Moto2, yes, there'd be less chaos, but that doesn't exactly mean the racing will be less entertaining. So overall, I'm sort of indifferent to this element of a change. Of course, I think I will miss the pack racing quite a lot because that is the best part of Moto3. However, I do think the fact that there'll be less pack racing will make the sport a lot safer and will be a lot less nerve-wracking to watch. So overall, I'm sort of indifferent to it. The other big change that will result from this is the fact that the gap between Moto3 and the rest of the classes is going to be much smaller than it currently is. At the moment, the difference in CC between Moto3 and MotoGP is 750cc. With the changes that are coming into play in the next few years, this gap will reduce to 150cc. This means there's going to be a very small gap between Moto3, then Moto2, then MotoGP. In theory, this means that riders from Moto3 should adapt much easier to Moto2. We've seen a fair few riders in recent years struggle to adapt to Moto2. Not especially this year, but people like Ayumu Sasaki, Jaume Masia, Izan Guevara struggled a lot initially. People like that, we should see that a lot less often. And overall, I think this is a mostly good thing because it is quite sad sometimes to see a rider who's done really well in Moto3 just really flounder and struggle to do well in Moto2. It does get a bit depressing sometimes watching that. So I think that overall this is a positive step for the sport, like in Moto2 really especially. And I think it will allow for a lot more competitivity in Moto2. You know, I think we'll have a lot more people hitting the ground running immediately. I think we may even have some people who, you know, come to Moto2 and become a title challenger immediately. That's very rare at the moment, and I think with these changes in place, we could see that happening a lot more often. I guess to counteract that, the fact that Moto3 bikes are going to become a lot bigger means that the people who are coming from like Red Bull rookies, for example, or Junior GP, they might struggle to adapt to Moto3 initially. We might see a big reduction in the success of Moto3 rookies. So, you know, if the Moto3 rookies get worse, but then the Moto2 rookies get better, you know, it's sort of a bit of a balancing act, really. I think that's just part of the sport progressing, really. You know, we can't have it being the same forever, and I don't mind that Dorna are willing to go for something a bit different. You can't have it being the same forever, so I don't mind Dorna making some changes to shake up the sport a little bit. It will be very interesting to see how it takes play in the future. I guess another result of these changes is that we might see a lot more Moto2 teams gamble on taking a rookie up from Moto3 to Moto2. Sometimes I think that Moto2 teams might be a bit cautious about hiring Moto3 riders in case they do struggle to adapt to the new bikes. However, if the new Moto3 bikes are going to be so similar to the Moto2 bikes, we might see a lot more Moto3 riders get shoved into Moto2 as quickly as possible, because teams might not be as worried of the Moto3 riders adapting to the Moto2 bike slowly. Of course, this is just speculation at this point. I'm just thinking of what could happen in the future. All of this could turn out to be nonsense in the end. I guess we won't find out until 2028 and beyond. Overall, I am cautiously optimistic about these changes to Moto3. I do think that something needed changing in Moto3. You can't have the same sport being the exact same forever. So I'm happy that Dorna are changing something and are willing to go for something different. But at the same time, this is coming at a sacrifice to the chaos racing, which, while it will be safer for the riders, it will take a bit away from the entertainment factor. You know, maybe they could have made the engines a bit smaller than 700cc, but not a lot bigger than they currently are now. But I guess there's a reason they've chosen 700cc. Dorna must know what they're doing, so I trust they've made the right decision. And I like the fact that they've chosen for it to be one engine for the whole grid. I think that's going to be a really positive step for Moto3. It will mean that the truly best riders rise to the top rather than the best teams rising to the top. So yeah, I think that overall I'm cautiously optimistic about the changes to Moto3 in 2028. But I want to know what you guys think, so let me know in the comments below. What do you think about these changes to Moto3? Will they make Moto3 better or worse? What effects do you think this will have on the upper classes like Moto2 and MotoGP? Let me know in the comments. And while you're there, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye bye.